Let yourself sink just a little deeper into whatever is holding you. Your bed, your pillow, the weight of your blankets. And as you settle, I'll guide you back in time, not to the version of the Soviet Union you may have seen in Western films. The Cold War thrillers with their shadowy alleyways and ever-present KGB agents, but to something far quieter, far stranger, and in its own way far heavier. What you're about to drift into is not the world of spies and interrogations. It is the world millions of ordinary Soviet citizens woke up to every single day. A world where the most complicated conflict wasn't international politics at all, but figuring out how to brush your teeth without half your building waiting outside the bathroom door. So, wherever you are listening from, whatever corner of the world keeps your home, your room, your warm private bathroom close by, take a moment to appreciate it. And if you happen to enjoy these slow wanderings through history, well, feel free to leave a note, a like, or a comment about where you're drifting off from. It always amazes me. People falling asleep to these stories under entirely different skies at entirely different hours, yet sharing this quiet moment together. Now, let's exhale. Let's loosen our shoulders. Let's move back to the Soviet Union of the early 1950s. Imagine yourself, for just a little while, waking up not in your own bed, but in a communal apartment. What the Soviets called a kommunalka dot in Leningrad in the year 1953. Stalin has only just died. His portraits still hang everywhere, his policies still shape every inch of society, and his presence still lingers like a shadow stretching across the morning. The air inside your room is cold, not biting but gently, persistently chilly in that way poorly heated Soviet buildings often felt. Central heating exists technically, but it is unpredictable. More of a suggestion than a guarantee. When you breathe, faint little clouds form in front of your mouth, dissolving slowly, as if even the air takes its time waking up. You're curled beneath a thin blanket, layered with a couple of old coats for extra warmth. And they've left your back a little stiff. Nothing like the soft, temperature-controlled bed you're lying in right now. Before your eyes have even opened fully, your ears begin taking inventory of the world around you. The metallic clatter of pots rattles faintly from the shared kitchen down the hall. Two neighbors are already arguing. Today it's about sugar. Yesterday it was dish soap. Tomorrow it will be something else entirely. The pipes groan with a long-suffering sigh as someone flushes the communal toilet. A baby cries in the room next door, its tiny voice cutting through the worn-out wooden door that never fully latches. Here, you are one of the lucky ones. Your family has a room all to itself, a single room of roughly 150 square feet. And that one room is your universe. It is the bedroom, the living room, the dining room, the closet, the storage space, and the only place where you and your family have even the illusion of privacy. Privacy itself in the Soviet 1950s is almost a suspicious concept, something people joke about as a bourgeois fantasy. You swing your legs over the edge of a narrow bed that transforms into a sitting couch during the day. Across the room, your parents sleep on a fold-out frame squeezed against the opposite wall. Between the two beds is a small table, cleared in the morning, set for meals in the afternoon, and crowded with teacups, newspapers, and belongings by night. Clothes hang not in a wardrobe, but on a row of hooks hammered into the wall, each item chosen as much for durability as for necessity. And now comes the morning challenge, the bathroom. In a communal living arrangement shared by 8 families, timing becomes a subtle art form. Too early, and the bathroom is unbearably cold. Too late, and you may find a queue that winds down the dim hallway, costing you precious minutes and possibly causing you to be late for work or school. The unspoken schedule, maintained not by rules but by sheer social fatigue, gives each family about 15 minutes. Often that is just barely enough time to wash your face, use the toilet, and brush your teeth. You gather your small toiletry kit. In these shared homes, everyone keeps their personal hygiene items locked away or zipped up. Nothing can be left in the bathroom. You take your towel, open your door gently to avoid waking the neighbor's infant, and step into the corridor. The single yellow bulb dangling above casts a sleepy glow across the parquet floors, which were once polished, elegant wood in the era when this entire apartment belonged to one wealthy family before the revolution. Now, the wood is worn to a soft matte, its history pressed into it by decades of footsteps. The wallpaper peels in long curling strips, revealing older layers beneath, like rings of time stacked on top of each other. You're not surprised to see the bathroom door closed. You're even less surprised to see Dmitry Petrovich standing in line ahead of you. He gives you a weary nod. His grey stubble catches the dim light. "Nikolai's in there," he mutters, referring to the elderly widow who lives down the hall and who somehow always takes the longest showers despite having the least hair to wash. It's been 10 minutes already. So you wait, leaning against the wall, listening to the quiet hum of this strange household waking up. This is the rhythm of life, a negotiation of shared space repeated every single morning for as long as anyone can remember. A small paper schedule is tacked near the kitchen door, a rotating timetable the neighbors maintain to prevent evening chaos. Cooking dinner time is a daily battlefield. Inside the kitchen, everything blurs together, public and private. One refrigerator with a separate shelf for each family, one cabinet for each household's dry goods, a gas stove modified repeatedly throughout the years, now sporting several mismatched burners, some reliable, some temperamental. A few families have brought in their own portable burners to avoid kitchen conflicts, because nothing ignites an argument quite like one person's soup boiling over onto another person's potatoes. At last, the bathroom door opens and steam escapes into the hallway. Nikolai shuffles out, wrapped in her towel, giving you a small nod that could mean sorry, or good morning, or simply next. Dmitry steps aside and offers you the bathroom first. A quiet kindness in a place where small, gentle gestures matter more than anyone admits. Inside, the bathroom is simple, worn, and functional. A stained tub, a shower attachment that works when it feels like cooperating, a cracked sink, a toilet with a chain you have to pull twice on cold mornings. But today, the hot water is truly warm, almost indulgent, a good sign. You move quickly, conscious of the invisible clock ticking in the hallway. 7 minutes. 8. Enough. Time to let the next person take their turn. Back in your family's room, your mother is already awake. She is heating water on a small electric burner that everyone pretends not to see because it's technically forbidden. She pours tea, strong, dark, necessary. The family samovar sits nearby, a precious heirloom that somehow survived the revolution, the civil war, the purges, and the catastrophic years of the Second World War. "Hurry," she says gently. "Your father has already left to stand in the bread line. Bread is part of the great choreography here. 3 mornings a week, he wakes before dawn to wait outside the bakery, bringing home enough fresh loaves for your family and for the neighbors who cover his days in return. These informal networks, these quiet systems of mutual aid, are how people endure the shortages and the staggered supply of basic goods. Your mother sets a bowl of kasha, warm buckwheat porridge. In front of you, sweetened with a carefully rationed spoonful of sugar, you eat standing up, out of habit as much as convenience. She mentions that there may be oranges at the state food shop today. The word itself feels like a burst of sunshine in this grey season, oranges from Georgia, or on rare occasions from abroad. If she is lucky enough to find them, one will be saved for a holiday still months away. Soon you put on your coat, thick wool, heavy, made for endurance rather than style, and glance at yourself in a small mirror by the door. Your clothes are presentable, but in this era, fashion is a luxury most people cannot afford to think about. Function matters more than anything else. The stairwell outside smells faintly of cabbage, tobacco, and the cold stone of old buildings. The elevator has been broken long enough that no one remembers it working. You descend 5 flights on foot, your steps echoing softly. Outside, Leningrad greets you with its familiar chill. It is October and winter is beginning to settle in. The sky is a dull grey, like wet concrete, and a light drizzle falls. Not quite rain, but enough to dampen your coat and your mood. People rush past you, collars raised, heads lowered, facing the long day ahead. At the tram stop, workers gather in a quiet cluster, stamping their feet for warmth. When the tram arrives, it is already filled to the brim, yet somehow everyone squeezes inside. Bodies pressed close, faces turned away, silence shared. And this, quietly and unceremoniously, is how another ordinary morning begins on the other side of the Iron Curtain. The tram rattles gently along the streets of Leningrad, its metal wheels humming a steady, rhythmic lull, as if the entire city is murmuring itself awake. Outside its fogged windows, history slides past in layers. An old imperial facade here, once the pride of the Tsars, now carved into cramped communal apartments, much like the one you left this morning. And then, beside it, a block of newer housing, hastily built after the war to shelter a population returning from siege, from evacuation, from unimaginable loss. The city is a kind of architectural layer cake, each era stacked unevenly on top of the last, Baroque palaces sitting shoulder to shoulder with stark constructivist clubs, all under the watchful silhouettes of Stalin-era buildings rising into the dull morning sky. Through the misted glass you glimpse the city slowly stirring. Already, thin lines form outside the shops. People waiting, hoping, guessing what the delivery trucks might bring today. Women with string bags stand patiently, prepared for disappointment but secretly wishing for something rare, something sweet, something colourful. Street sweepers in faded orange vests move with methodical calm, clearing away yesterday's dust and leaves. Posters on brick walls declare the triumphs of the latest 5-year plan, showing bright-eyed workers grinning beneath slogans promising abundance and progress. Their painted expressions glow with socialist pride, but inside the tram, the real faces are far more subdued. Tired eyes, heavy coats, the quiet resignation of people heading into another predictable day. There is a sense of security in all this, though, a steady hum beneath the greyness. Everyone has work, everyone has a role, everyone belongs to something larger than themselves. And in a world still recovering from war, that sense of place, however modest, brings a kind of comfort. At your stop, you gently squeeze toward the door, murmuring soft apologies as you navigate the tightly packed crowd. Feet shuffle, coats brush against you, and at last you step down into the chilled morning air. You join the steady flow of workers moving toward the factory gates, carried forward by the same momentum that pulls the whole city into motion each dawn. The Kirov works stretches before you, a vast industrial kingdom of chimneys, workshops, storage yards, and administrative buildings, a world unto itself. Smokestacks exhale thick ribbons into the colourless sky, and the clang of metal rings steadily across the grounds. This is a place with its own pulse, its own time, its own hierarchies, where thousands of workers arrive each morning to keep the machinery of the Soviet state turning. At the gate, you flash your papers to the guard who barely glances at them. He knows you, he knows everyone. Faces blur together after years of routine. Inside, you weave your way through the familiar corridors, nodding to co-workers who are shrugging out of their coats or tying their work boots. The changing room is warm with the collective heat of bodies in motion. Men talking quietly as they shift from the outside world into the industrial one. Discussing rumors of winter boots arriving at the department store, worrying about sick children, sharing hopeful whispers about which factory sections might exceed quotas this month and earn a small bonus. Your locker holds your sturdy work clothes, heavy trousers, thick shirts, and the protective gear required at your station. You change quickly. Punctuality is important. Being late risks more than reprimand. It risks attention from the party representative, the quiet watcher who monitors discipline. The factory floor greets you with its familiar roar. Machines pound, metal shrieks. Foremen shout instructions over the din. The air is thick, oily, metallic, humid with the breath and effort of hundreds of workers. Your station awaits you, a lathe that shapes metal parts for tractors destined for collective farms across the vast Soviet Union. The work is repetitive, but precise, the kind of labor that demands skill, endurance, and unwavering attention. Yet there is a certain calm in the repetition, a meditative rhythm. You guide the metal into place. The lathe spins. The shavings curl away like tiny silver ribbons. You may not think about each movement, but your hands know exactly what to do, and deep down you feel a modest pride. These tractors will cultivate the fields, bring in harvests, and help feed millions. You are part of something tangible, something necessary. Hours pass in the steady hum of work. While your hands move, your thoughts drift toward the possibility of saving enough money for a radio, toward the distant dream of securing your own apartment from the factory housing list, though the wait stretches years into the future, toward the faint hope of seeing your name on the worker honor board, earning a little extra pay and a little extra dignity. Around you, the Soviet economic machine lumbers forward. Quotas must be met, plans must be fulfilled. Posters outside proclaim the dedication of the new Soviet man, but the daily reality is more complicated. You see it all: the shortages, the times when materials fail to arrive, and workers improvise solutions. The state will never acknowledge the moments when quality is sacrificed for quantity, especially near the end of the month when numbers must look good on paper. You see the quiet subversions, workers slowing their pace when supervisors' backs are turned, saving their energy for the long week ahead. You hear the whispered jokes, the small, harmless rebellions that help people breathe under the weight of a rigid system. And of course there are the informal networks, the whispered agreements, the I know a guy who knows a guy arrangements that keep the factory functioning when official procedures fall short. This is the dual reality of the Soviet 1950s, the public story of unstoppable socialist progress, and the private daily truth of navigating shortages, bureaucracy, and endless minor frustrations. At mid-morning, the factory horn sounds its brief, echoing call. 10 minutes, just enough time to step outside, stretch your fingers, breathe air that isn't thick with machine oil. Some light cigarettes, others sip weak tea, others unwrap small sandwiches brought from home. You walk out into the drizzle, grey concrete under your feet, and beyond the factory walls, the faint glitter of the Baltic Sea through the haze. Even in this industrial bleakness, there is something beautiful about Leningrad, a city that has endured so much and remains standing, quiet and strong. The horn sounds again. Break is over. Back to the machines, back to the quotas, back to helping build in your own modest way the imagined socialist future. And so the hours roll by, each one marked by the slow march of the clock on the wall. Time stretches when the tasks demand focus, then suddenly speeds up when the end of the shift draws near. Factory life has its own predictable tide, repetitive yet always coloured by the small human stories unfolding within it. Then the horn blares again. The shift changes, and in a slow, dreamlike dissolve, the years pass. It is now 1962. The Soviet Union has shifted subtly under Khrushchev's thaw. The fear that once clung to every whisper has loosened, though it has not disappeared entirely. People speak a little more openly, though they still glance around before voicing anything too bold. You have moved up gradually, your years of patient work recognized at last. You are now a section supervisor in a newer factory in Moscow. Moscow is different, faster, louder, more electric. It is the beating heart of the Soviet system, the place where decisions ripple outward to millions. Yet for you, the most profound change is far more personal. You now live not in a kommunalka, but in your own apartment, a modest one-bedroom in one of the new Khrushchevka buildings, rising in identical rows across the capital. These buildings are simple and plain, built quickly, standardized in every detail. From the outside, they almost resemble giant filing cabinets, square windows, flat walls, identical entrances. But inside, each home becomes its own world. You have a tiny kitchen barely large enough for a table, thin walls through which neighbors' radios can sometimes be heard, and a narrow balcony where a few potted plants brave the polluted air. Yet all of it is yours, your own door, your own bathroom, your own quiet. After years of communal life, this is not just an apartment. It is a small, precious miracle. The morning routine, once shaped by the noise and rhythm of communal life, has become something quieter now, something more contained, more predictable. You wake not to the shuffle of neighbors in the hallway, or to distant voices rising with the sun, but to the soft, mechanical ring of an alarm clock. The bathroom, once shared and often occupied, stands empty and waiting for you, its tiled walls cool and still. In the small hush of your kitchen, you prepare breakfast at your own pace. Tea steeping slowly, a piece of bread spread unhurriedly with butter. These changes may appear small from the outside, but in the quiet fabric of your mornings, they settle like small freedoms, noticeable precisely because they are gentle. Your commute, too, has taken on a new shape. The Moscow metro unfolds beneath the city like a vast humming monument to Soviet ambition. A system engineered not only to function, but to inspire. Unlike the utilitarian tunnels of many Western cities, Moscow's stations are grand chambers filled with mosaics, sculptures, polished stone, and glowing chandeliers. A kind of architectural propaganda, yes, but propaganda that seeks to elevate the ordinary commuter, to suggest with marble and sparkle that the state sees value in their daily journey. On the platform you stand among workers heading outward, toward factories, toward offices, toward the sprawling industrial body of the capital. When the train arrives, precisely on schedule as always, you join the quiet press of bodies inside. The silence is characteristic. Conversation feels almost out of place. Most passengers simply stare ahead, lost in private thoughts, saving their energy for the long day to come. Your stop lies on the city's industrial edge, where your factory rises with the plain, pragmatic lines of the post-war expansion. It produces components for Soviet televisions, still luxuries for many, but slowly becoming symbols of the rising standard of living. As a section supervisor, your responsibilities stretch far beyond your own work. 20 workers depend on your guidance, their quotas, their discipline, their problems. Whether missing materials or malfunctioning machines, all flow toward your desk. It is a role suspended between two worlds, the expectations of upper management and the lived realities of the factory floor. You arrive early, as every good supervisor is expected to. Your office, a small glass-walled cubicle overlooking the production floor, may be modest, but to you it represents the slow, deliberate ascent through the Soviet system. On your desk are the quiet fixtures of your days, a family photograph, a telephone connecting you to other departments, and piles upon piles of paperwork. The bureaucratic engine that hums beneath every Soviet institution. The morning meeting comes first. In a narrow conference room, the director, Comrade Vulov, presides with the steady assurance of a man whose position owes as much to political reliability as to managerial skill. Beside him, the chief engineer, Comrade Sokolov, embodies the technical side of authority, the one who truly understands the machinery and the process. This split between political leadership and practical expertise is woven deeply through the Soviet system. Comrades, Vulov begins, his voice carrying the practiced seriousness of official announcements. The ministry has increased our third quarter plan targets. Production must rise by 12%. A murmur ripples through the room. 12% is no small number. Mid-year increases mean that all prior resource allocations already stretched thin must somehow expand further. When a supervisor questions where these materials are meant to come from, Vulov offers only the familiar assurances. The ministry promises additional supplies, and until then, reserves must be found. Everyone understands what that means. Reserves, an unofficial word for cutting corners, stretching materials, and innovating in ways rarely written down. The meeting drifts onward, touching on delayed shipments, an upcoming visit from party officials, the factory sports competition. Beneath the formal updates flows a shared understanding. The official plan and the practical reality will never perfectly align, and the space between them must be navigated carefully. After the meeting, you return to your section. You greet each worker as they arrive. Knowing their histories, their habits, their strengths and shortcomings, there is male, gifted with his hands but prone to drink, young Galina, fresh from technical school, and old Fodor, who survived the war and now works slowly, deliberately, with a precision that time cannot rush. When you announce the new 12% target, their reactions, groans, rolled eyes, resigned comments, are predictable, but no one protests. They know how the system bends without breaking. You begin by sending Galina and Nikolai to review the inventory, including the discreet, unofficial reserves stashed for emergencies. Another quiet tradition of Soviet factories. Though technically forbidden, these hidden supplies often prevent entire lines from grinding to a halt. The day settles into its rhythm. Machines hum, conveyor belts glide, workers perform their repetitive tasks. Your role becomes one of constant motion, observing, adjusting, solving small problems before they grow into crises. Late in the morning, the first such crisis arrives. A machine on the assembly line sputters to a stop. Ivan, the operator, looks up with familiar frustration. It is the same overheating issue as last month. A replacement machine should have arrived long ago, but delays are routine. You call maintenance. Petro, nearing retirement with decades of experience, appears with his toolbox. He studies the machine with a sigh that carries years of unspoken complaints. The part needed to fix the issue should have come from Kharkov, but it never did. You ask if anything in the workshop might serve as a substitute, a delicate way of requesting a handmade solution. Petro thinks for a moment and heads towards Sergei, the keeper of a private trove of salvaged parts. This is how the factory survives. Unofficial channels, personal networks, creativity within the cracks of bureaucracy. The formal system may plan, allocate, and set quotas, but the informal system, the human system, keeps the machines moving. By noon, Petro has coaxed the machine back to life, though he warns that the fix will not last. You make a mental note to call a colleague at the Kirov factory, hoping a past favor will return a needed part. Lunch arrives as a small, functional pause. In the cafeteria, workers eat quickly. Cabbage soup, cutlets, mashed potatoes and compote. Conversations drift between last night's sports results and plans for summer holidays. Supervisors sit together, exchanging a subtle mix of information and rumor. In a system where official channels reveal only curated truths, personal connections become the true pathways of knowledge. After lunch, production numbers show moderate progress. Not enough for the new targets, but better than expected. There is still a long path ahead, though. Perhaps the evening shift can take on more work, especially with the incentive of bonuses. Bonuses form another quiet contradiction of Soviet life. While the system officially rejects capitalist ideals, bonuses create a kind of internal competition, a push for quantity often at the expense of quality. End-of-month surges and occasional number fudging become part of the unspoken routine, shaping the rhythm of production in ways the planners never intended. Your afternoon settles into a quieter rhythm, one shaped not by machines or rushing footsteps on the factory floor, but by the steady, almost hypnotic presence of paperwork. In the Soviet system, documentation is its own vast landscape. Endless forms completed in triplicate. Reports destined for departments whose names you can recite automatically, and statistics that will drift steadily upward through layers of administration until they fade into the immense, unseen machinery of central planning. Whether these numbers truly shape decisions somewhere far above you is uncertain. What is certain is that the paperwork must always be done. And so, with your pen moving in slow, practiced lines, you fill out the production reports, all while keeping one eye on the glass partition that gives you a view of the factory floor. Over the years, you have grown skilled at holding both responsibilities at once, the quiet world of forms and the noisy world of machines, balancing them as every competent Soviet manager eventually learns to do. A soft knock breaks the rhythm. When you look up, you see Dmitry from personnel standing in the doorway. He is young, eager, carrying ambitions that reach far beyond the dim corridors of the factory office. His appearance usually signals that something has shifted somewhere. Perhaps an opportunity, perhaps a complication, often a blend of the two. He steps inside with an air of formality that suggests official business. "Comrade Supervisor," he begins, "the party committee has begun reviewing candidates for the advanced training program in Moscow. Your name has been mentioned." The words hang in the air, quiet but significant. The advanced program is not just a training course, it is a doorway, a path leading upward into the ministry level with all its additional responsibilities and privileges. But in the Soviet system, opportunities always come wrapped in political considerations. You respond with careful courtesy, "I'm honored. Who recommended me?" The question is not merely polite. In the intricate web of Soviet hierarchy, sponsorship shapes futures, and knowing who stands behind you helps you navigate the subtle currents of power. Dmitri's smile widens in a knowing way. The chief engineer, Comrade Sokolov, has praised your technical expertise, and, of course, your enthusiastic participation in last year's voluntary Saturday work was noted favorably. The translation is clear enough: your competence and your willingness to support public initiatives, however ceremonial, have positioned you well. Advancement in this system requires both genuine ability and demonstrated loyalty, or at least a visible alignment with expected values. Dmitri adds one more detail, with casual delicacy. The committee would like to see more involvement in the factory's political education sessions. Perhaps you could lead one next month. On the role of technical innovation in socialist construction. It is an invitation, a suggestion, and an unspoken expectation all at once. Declining would not punish you immediately, but accepting would smooth your path considerably. You nod, knowing the calculus well. I would be happy to prepare something, you say, aware that an evening or two spent crafting a careful lecture is a small price to pay for possible advancement. When Dmitri leaves, the afternoon has already begun to deepen. You return to the production floor for the last stretch of the shift. The atmosphere is different now, not sluggish, but marked by a certain weariness, blended with the determination to finish the day's work. The workers move with practiced familiarity, their hands executing tasks their bodies have memorized over years. Minds drift toward evening plans, conversations left hanging from lunch, family matters waiting at home. You make your rounds slowly, offering quiet encouragement or gentle correction where needed, a word of praise to Galina for her meticulous work, a reminder to Mail to stay focused, a silent nod to old Fodor, whose steady rhythm never changes. These small interactions, private, momentary, are what keep the section running as smoothly as any official directive. As the end of the shift draws near, the tempo rises slightly. No one wants to leave loose ends for the evening shift. Unfinished tasks weigh on the next team and cast shadows on performance metrics. The last hour becomes a soft flurry of completed units, final quality checks, and brief exchanges between workers. Then, at last, the horn sounds. A familiar, almost comforting signal that the day shift has ended. Workers tidy their stations, an ingrained part of Soviet industrial discipline, before walking toward the changing rooms. The evening crew begins to arrive, creating a brief overlap where information is passed along in quick, practical murmurs. What broke, what held, what still needs attention. Your day still has a little to go. The supervisors gather once more for the final meeting, a short review of numbers, issues, and the uncertainties of tomorrow's schedule. But as you walk toward the administrative building, you can feel something gentle loosening inside you, the transition from your official self to your private one. Soon, you will step through the factory gates and enter the parallel world of daily life outside. The Soviet system tries, in many ways, to blur the lines between work and home, between public roles and private selves, but a separation always remains. In apartments and kitchens, in the quiet company of friends, in evenings spent reading or listening to the radio, the personal world continues unplanned and unsupervised. After today's meeting, perhaps you will stop at a shop, following a half-whispered rumor that something, sugar, oranges, a rare tin of fish, might be available. Perhaps you will wait in a line for an hour, just in case, or you might visit a friend for tea, or simply return home for a quiet evening with a book. These small pleasures, modest as they are, shape the fabric of everyday life. The system promises grand collective achievements, but most people live inside the quieter space of ordinary limitations, finding meaning in small routines. As you step into the meeting room, this awareness follows you, the widening space between official narratives and lived experience, between socialist ideals and the compromises required to keep life moving. It is within this space, quiet and unadorned, that the true story of Soviet life slowly unfolds. Morning comes again, as it always does. Sunlight slips through thin white curtains into a Moscow apartment. The year is 1968, and the world is shifting in ways both dramatic and subtle. Students in Paris fill the streets with protest. Across the ocean, the United States faces its own turmoil. And in the Soviet Union, a new generation is growing up, untouched by the terror of Stalin's era and the suffering of the war. It is a generation with different expectations, shaped by stability rather than survival. When the alarm clock rings, 13-year-old Natasha reaches out sleepily to silence it. She has never lived in a communal apartment. She has known only this small but private space, with her own narrow room doubling as a place to study. Her desk is scattered with school books and a half-finished grammar assignment. The shelves hold carefully chosen volumes, official Soviet stories, translations of Jules Verne and Jack London, adventures deemed safe and useful in shaping young minds. Her school uniform waits on the chair, the simple brown dress, the apron, the red pioneer scarf that she ties each morning with practiced care. Nearly every child between 9 and 14 is a pioneer, part of the nationwide organization that blends civic education with ritual. It is not formally mandatory, but everyone understands that opting out would raise questions, a quiet shadow over the family's ideological reliability. In the kitchen, the morning begins as it always does. Her mother prepares kasha, the warm porridge that seems to have existed forever in Soviet homes. Her father sits at the table with a copy of Pravda, its headlines highlighting industrial victories and international socialist friendships. The radio hums softly with morning exercises and official news. "Hurry, Natasha," her mother calls, reminding her that there is a pioneer meeting before classes. The meetings are structured gatherings, songs, discussions of party history, planning of community projects. To the children, they are simply part of school life, a natural extension of the collective spirit that surrounds them. The school is only a short walk away, part of the careful planning of the micro-district. The autumn air is crisp, and trees in nearby parks glow softly with the first hints of gold. Children from the surrounding buildings move toward the school in steady streams, identical uniforms blending into one rhythmic motion. At the entrance, the statue of Lenin watches over them, as he watches over so many institutions across the country. Inside, Natasha joins her pioneer troop in the assembly hall. 30 children stand in formation, their red scarves bright against the uniform brown. At the front, the young pioneer leader calls them to attention, and another day, another piece of Soviet childhood, quietly begins. The ceremony unfolds with the steady, unhurried rhythm that marks so many Soviet rituals. The bright red flag rises slowly toward the ceiling, its fabric barely stirring in the still air of the assembly hall. 30 young voices follow, soft at first, then gathering into a single, carefully shaped sound as they recite the pioneer oath. "I, a young pioneer of the Soviet Union." The words come easily, worn into memory by years of repetition, familiar enough to feel almost like part of breathing, yet in the quiet harmony of their voices, 30 lives woven briefly into one. There is something faintly stirring, something that gently reminds each child that they belong to a larger story. And then, almost without transition, the children settle into the long flow of a regular school day. Soviet school days follow a measured pattern, beginning early, stretching well into the afternoon, 6 days a week, and moving from subject to subject with the same dependable cadence that shapes so much of Soviet life. Natasha takes her seat in her mathematics classroom, where the stern, precise teacher stands ready at the blackboard. In this country, mathematics is not merely a subject. It is a language of progress, a pillar of national pride. Lessons unfold in chalk lines and quiet concentration. Problems are solved. Mistakes are corrected. Students rise one by one to show their work. It is demanding, but it is also familiar, grounding, predictable. After mathematics comes literature, where the great Russian writers speak through carefully approved interpretations. Pushkin, Tolstoy, Chekhov. Names repeated so often they become part of the texture of school life. The lessons are intellectual, yet also soft around the edges, shaped by ideology but rich with stories that children absorb almost without noticing. By midday, the aroma of simple food fills the cafeteria, bowls of soup, warm kotlety, the sweet tart fragrance of compote. Lunch is shared in long rows, uniforms blending into one another, a sea of brown dresses and black aprons, white collars and red scarves. Equality is not merely an idea here. It is a daily scene, played out in identical plates and identical schedules. Afternoon brings history, taught with firm lines and clear conclusions, and physical education, where boys and girls run, stretch, and train under the cool eye of a whistle-bearing instructor. The day continues, smooth and structured, carrying Natasha from one classroom to the next like a current moving gently down a wide river. When the dismissal bell finally rings, the day is not yet finished. For Natasha, there is choir practice, a room filled with young voices rehearsing patriotic songs for the upcoming celebration of the October Revolution. Other children scatter to chess clubs, sports training, technical circles. These activities serve the state, yes, but they also offer something simpler, a place to spend time with friends, to discover small talents, to belong. By the time Natasha walks home, dusk has settled over Moscow. The lamps glow softly. The air is cool with autumn. She lets herself into the apartment with the key that hangs from a string around her neck, another quiet symbol of Soviet childhood. The home is empty for the moment. Her parents are still at work, so she fixes a small snack and settles at her tidy desk. Homework stretches before her like a familiar evening landscape, mathematics exercises, a Pushkin poem to memorize, geography notes to study. Outside, the city continues its endless hum. But inside the apartment there is only quiet and the gentle scratch of a pencil on paper. Her parents eventually return, tired but carrying a rare treat. Bright oranges, fragrant and precious. Dinner is simple, as always. Cabbage soup, buckwheat, a bit of meat, dark bread, hot tea. They talk softly about their day. The radio shifts from news to classical music, leaving a gentle wash of strings and woodwinds floating through the room. Later, the television flickers to life. Tonight, there is a documentary about Soviet achievements in space. Images of rockets rising into the sky, of smiling cosmonauts saluting from their capsules. For a few minutes, the family watches together, bathed in the silver-blue glow of the screen. As bedtime approaches, Natasha prepares for the next day. She lays out her uniform, organizes her notebooks, checks her schedule. The evening closes gently around her. When she finally slips into bed, she reads a little. Stories of pioneer heroes, simple and earnest, the kind of tales that drift easily through a young mind as sleep begins to settle. And then the years pass quietly, as they often do. Natasha grows older. Now 18, she stands at the edge of adulthood, her final year of school unfolding with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. Her teachers have tracked her progress for years, noting her steady strength in mathematics and sciences. University may lie ahead, perhaps engineering, perhaps medicine. Admission is competitive, but education is free, and the state has plans for every field, every specialty, every future. The Komsomol, whose membership marks a more serious stage of youth, plays a central role now. At a meeting, Natasha listens as a university student, explains the needs of the latest 5-year plan. More engineers, particularly in electronics and automation. The message is calm, almost gentle. Your path, your future, should follow the needs of the nation. The room is quieter than the pioneer gatherings of childhood. These are young adults, aware now of nuance, aware of the gap between official life and private thought. They listen politely, taking notes, their expressions thoughtful. Afterwards, Natasha walks with her friend Olga through the cool Moscow streets. Their conversation slips easily from future plans to private hopes, to small dreams whispered softly in the spaces where official ideology grows thin. Natasha is thinking of engineering, good housing, good prospects. But Olga brings up something else entirely, lowering her voice as if protecting a secret. My cousin has real Beatles records, she says, not copies. He invited us to listen on Saturday. And just like that, the two worlds of Soviet youth, the public and the private, the officially encouraged and the quietly forbidden, brush gently against each other. The promise of a university future on one side, the thrill of Western music shared in a friend's apartment on the other. These contrasts do not clash. They coexist, layered like the pages of a history book that can be read in more than one direction. The city around them is dim and calm, the streetlights glowing softly in the growing night. Their footsteps are quiet. Their future feels both mapped and open. And in the slow, drifting space of that walk home, the vast machinery of Soviet life seems, for a moment, very far away. The next morning at school unfolds with its usual quiet choreography, the kind of steady rhythm that has shaped Natasha's life for as long as she can remember. After the first bell, the class gathers in a dim, slightly echoing lecture hall for a special presentation on Soviet science and world progress. A local party official stands before them, speaking in a calm, practiced cadence about the virtues of socialist research. How, under the steady hand of collective planning, science is free from the distortions of profit and private competition. His voice carries smoothly through the room, like a gentle hum, and the students listen with expressions of attentive politeness, pens moving slowly over the pages of their notebooks. Everyone knows these notes may be collected, and so they shape them carefully, writing what is expected, what is safe, what is correct. Out in the corridor afterward, the atmosphere relaxes. Students drift in small groups, their voices dropping to soft private tones. One boy leans toward Natasha and murmurs almost inaudibly, "My uncle works at the Research Institute. He says we're 5 years behind the Americans in computers." Such quiet admissions travel through trusted circles, like drifting currents beneath the surface of an official sea. Most young people learn early how to move between these two worlds, the public and the private, shifting calmly from approved enthusiasm to gentle, confidential realism. It is not experienced as rebellion, it is simply a practical way of existing, a quiet accommodation to the shape of lived reality. They appreciate what the system provides: security, shared purpose, a world without the anxieties of unemployment or medical debt, while understanding its limitations just as clearly. Later, in the school library, a warm, slightly dusty space where the shelves carry the wear of decades, Natasha searches for information about universities. The books are old but thorough. The librarian, an elderly woman with a slow, soothing voice, guides her through the options with the wisdom collected from many generations of students. "The Polytechnic has a very good engineering program," she suggests gently. "Several of our graduates have done well there. And the dormitories, well, they're newer than most. Practical considerations blend with academic aspirations. In the Soviet system, merit opens doors, but navigating the subtler layers. The better dorms, the respected professors, the programs with stronger connections, requires a different kind of knowledge, passed quietly from one person to another. As spring deepens, the school year begins its slow, inevitable descent toward final examinations. Natasha and her classmates push through their studies with a calm, deliberate seriousness. For some, the future will bring university lecture halls, for others, technical training schools, and for many, a direct step into the workforce. All understand that the choices they make now, and the grades they receive, will echo through the pathways they follow in adulthood. The future stretches before them with a sense of predictability that feels almost comforting: the jobs, the apartments, the marriages, the steady progression of life within a system that promises stability if not excitement. Few imagine that this system, so solid in appearance, might one day falter. In these early years of the 1970s, the Soviet Union feels immovable, secure, as though it has settled into a long, unchanging twilight. The ceremonies, the komsomol meetings, the standardized lessons, and the collective rituals have shaped these young people for integration, not transformation. Yet quietly, beneath this calm surface, something is already shifting. Natasha's generation, raised in relative material stability rather than war or revolutionary fervor, carries slightly different expectations. Soft, subtle differences that will matter later. They take certain comforts for granted. They are more aware of the system's shortcomings, especially when glimpses of Western culture slip through in small, treasured fragments. Still, for now, Natasha's concerns remain immediate: exams to study for, applications to complete, komsomol duties to fulfill. The system is shaping her, but she too is shaping the small ways she fits within it, finding private spaces for her own thoughts and curiosities. Years drift by. It is now 1975. A record player spins softly in the corner of a modest Moscow apartment. The familiar Melodia label turns under the needle, releasing gentle waves of Soviet estrada music. Smooth vocals, restrained orchestrations, melodies that speak of simple emotions and officially comfortable themes. Natasha, now 25, sits in a well-worn armchair, letting the music fill the quiet room. After graduating from the Moscow Engineering Physics Institute, she has found her place as an engineer at a research facility in the capital. Her apartment, allocated after a relatively short 2-year wait, carries the modest imprint of standard Soviet furnishings. The same wall unit, the same sofa, the same lamps found in apartments across the country. But in the soft corners of the room, her personal touches appear. Shelves filled with books, technical manuals beside Russian classics, and a few precious foreign volumes passed from friend to friend. On the balcony, pots of green plants soften the view of concrete buildings stretching outward like grey horizons. When the record ends, she lifts the needle and replaces the disc with another. This one, a fragile, faintly translucent circle cut from old X-ray film. Music on ribs, as people call it. The sound crackles, distorted, imperfect. But through the grainy hiss, the unmistakable voices of the Beatles emerge. This quiet act of listening, neither entirely forbidden nor truly permitted, adds a small thrill to the evening. A gentle reminder that another world exists out there, beyond the limits of Soviet broadcasts. The telephone rings. It is Olga, her friend since school days, now a doctor at a city clinic. "Are you still coming tonight?" she asks. They're showing White Sun of the Desert at the Cosmos. Soviet cinema, with its mix of artistic talent and ideological boundaries, remains one of the more vibrant cultural avenues available. Some films, like this one, a beloved blend of adventure, humor, and patriotic spirit, have found a special place in the collective imagination. Cosmonauts even watch it before launches, a quiet superstition wrapped in state-approved culture. "Of course," Natasha replies. "Let's meet at the metro at 6. Maybe afterward we can try that new cafe, if the line isn't too long." Cafes, those modest, carefully designed spaces of Soviet leisure, have begun to appear more often in recent years, offering simple food and a place to sit outside one's home or workplace. Not Western, not luxurious, but new. And newness carries its own quiet appeal. The metro ride brings Natasha through stations that glimmer with chandeliers, mosaics, and polished stone, those vast underground halls built to inspire workers with a sense of grandeur beneath the city's streets. The contrast between this underground splendor and the more worn, everyday reality above is striking, yet so familiar that most commuters no longer think about it at all. The Cosmos Cinema, a modernist structure from the optimistic 1960s, is busy even on a weekday evening. Tickets are inexpensive as culture is meant to be accessible to all, not shaped by market forces. Inside, the newsreels play first, offering polished images of industrial success, international friendship, and the superiority of the socialist way. The audience watches with polite interest, their minds drifting in that familiar space between acknowledgement and quiet doubt. When the feature begins, the room warms with genuine laughter and shared appreciation. The desert vistas, the humor, the performances, these draw real feeling from the audience. For a moment, everyone in the cinema seems gently connected, part of a temporary community built around a shared story. After the film, Natasha and Olga step into the cool evening air, their conversation gliding effortlessly between admiration for the film's artistry and mild, careful critique, kept within the soft boundaries of what is safe to express. The city lights flicker around them. The night is calm. The world feels settled, familiar, and unhurried, even as history continues, quietly, almost imperceptibly. To move onward beneath the surface, in the quiet, unhurried days of the Brezhnev era, where time itself seemed to stretch into a kind of soft, unbroken ribbon, certain subjects still drifted through public life with a faint sense of caution. Even in a period remembered for its relative stability and loosened tensions, there were always invisible borders, lines that every Soviet citizen learned to sense rather than see. It was an intuition absorbed gradually, the way one learns the pattern of seasons or the subtle shift of light as dusk approaches. Natasha and Olga, slipping into a modest cafe after their evening at the cinema, carried this awareness with them as naturally as their coats and handbags. The place was neither crowded nor empty, just comfortably filled with the low murmur of conversations and the clinking of dishes. They chose a small table by the window and ordered simple pastries and cups of coffee, beverages whose quality rarely impressed, yet whose warmth and routine offered a gentle anchor in the rhythm of their days. Their talk drifted in slow, meandering currents, moving from the film they had just seen to familiar stories about friends and colleagues. Eventually, it eased into the topic of leisure. Specifically, Olga's upcoming vacation, one of those treasured annual reprieves granted through workplace sanatoria. In the Soviet world, such vacations were not merely restful retreats but structured blends of health, improvement, and orderly enjoyment, echoing the state's belief that even rest should serve a collective purpose. Olga explained with a quiet pride softened by modesty that she had been assigned 2 weeks in Sochi, that coming August, a reward, the clinic director had said, for surpassing preventative care targets. Vacation vouchers, those coveted putyovki, followed a system as intricate and opaque as any natural ecosystem. Part merit, part need, part personal connections, and part pure chance. The Black Sea resorts, with their kinder climate and long beaches, were the most sought after of all, rare pearls in a country accustomed to long winters and practical austerity. Natasha listened with a gentle resignation. Her own application was still somewhere in the slow-moving channels of workplace allocation. Last year she had been sent to a sanatorium just outside Moscow, a modest place chosen less for charm than availability. This unevenness of access, this reliance on waiting lists, connections, and institutional decisions was simply another facet of Soviet consumer life, where money mattered less than position, reputation, and the ability to navigate the quiet, unspoken networks lying beneath official structures. As the two women stepped back onto the evening streets, the sky still held the lingering pale light of a Moscow summer, stretching well past what would be twilight in other seasons. They walked unhurriedly through familiar avenues, past imposing government ministries and broad squares shaped for public gatherings. Then, almost casually, Olga mentioned that her brother had managed to secure tickets to a concert by Vysotsky the following month. She lowered her voice instinctively, not because the topic was forbidden, but because it lived somewhere in the delicate grey zone that neither fully belonged to official culture nor stood outside it. Vysotsky, with his gravel-edged voice and heartfelt songs that nudged at truths without directly confronting them, had become one of the era's most captivating figures. His concerts sold out instantly. His records, nearly impossible to obtain through official shops, circulated hand-to-hand in unofficial, almost secretive channels. A parallel cultural world that existed quietly beside the sanctioned one. These small spaces of near-permitted cultural life acted as subtle pressure valves, a way for society to breathe. The authorities tolerated them as long as they did not cross certain boundaries, creating an atmosphere where people could glimpse other possibilities without stepping into outright opposition. The weekend arrived with its own patterns, familiar and steady. In 1975, Saturday remained a workday, though murmurs of a future 5-day week drifted through offices and workshops like rumors carried on a light breeze. Sunday, the single true day of rest, unfolded with comforting predictability across Soviet households. Much of the day revolved around domestic responsibilities: cleaning, shopping, repairs, and preparations for the coming week. Tasks that drew entire families into the steady pulse of collective effort. Consumer services were limited and unreliable, so do-it-yourself skills became second nature, a matter of practicality rather than hobby. Soviet apartments, always in some stage of tinkering or improvement, relied on the resourcefulness of their occupants to make life function smoothly amid shortages. But Sundays were not only about responsibilities. When the weather allowed, Many families escaped the city for a few hours, walking through forests or sitting beside rivers, letting nature offer its calm, unhurried solace. Parks provided concerts and modest amusements, and sports facilities offered simple ways to stay active. Cross-country skiing in winter, picnicking in summer, ice skating in the crisp, cold months. For a system emphasizing the ideal of the well-rounded socialist citizen, physical culture was always close at hand. One Sunday, as soft and unhurried as so many before it, Natasha visited her parents across the city. These family gatherings, held around modest tables in apartments shaped by decades of shared effort, formed the quiet backbone of Soviet life. Conversations slipped easily between family matters and workplace anecdotes, occasionally touching, with careful phrasing, on political observations safer to express within the closed circle of trusted relatives. Her mother served a lovingly prepared meal, assembled from ingredients gathered through the many hidden tributaries of Soviet procurement. Some purchased in ordinary stores, others from farmers' markets, and a few special items from workplace allotments. With pride, she displayed a package of coffee brought back from East Germany by her father's colleague, a treasure in a country where good coffee remained elusive. The meal stretched long into the afternoon, supported by the steady hum of conversation and the unspoken comfort of familiarity. Discussion turned to a popular television program from the previous evening, one of those limited but culturally unifying broadcasts that spread across the entire country like a shared heartbeat. Shows like 17 Moments of Spring became national events, moments when workplaces paused the next day not to discuss production quotas, but storylines and characters. In a vast nation divided by geography, profession, and status, such shared cultural reference points quietly connected millions. After the meal, they listened to classical music on the radio, a genre that the Soviet state championed through extensive support and wide accessibility. Ballet, opera, theatre, and orchestral performances, often subsidized or broadcast freely, remained among the country's cultural treasures. When evening arrived, Natasha returned home, preparing herself for the familiar rhythm of the work week ahead. Soviet life, with its steady routines and limited but comforting variations, unfolded with a predictability that shaped citizens' days and expectations. Workplaces served not only as sites of employment, but as entire social ecosystems, managing housing, vacations, political education, and cultural activities. The boundary between public and private life was porous, and colleagues often formed the core of one's social circle. Later in the week, Natasha attended a lecture at the House of Scientists, a cultural institution designed for professional enrichment. The topic: cybernetics had once been ideologically suspect but was now cautiously acknowledged as essential to future development. In that room of specialists, ideological framing softened, allowing genuine scientific conversations to take shape. After the lecture, a small group gathered in a colleague's apartment, where discussions flowed more freely. It was in these quiet, private spaces, around kitchen tables over mugs of tea, that much of Soviet intellectual life breathed most naturally. Here, people shared uncensored thoughts, exchanged books, and explored ideas in ways that would have been impossible in more public settings. This private sphere was not rebellion, not in any organized or oppositional sense. It was simply a pragmatic way of living, an acceptance of boundaries paired with a quiet creation of personal space within them. For most Soviet citizens, this dual existence did not feel like deceit but like an ordinary adaptation to a system that shaped their world while leaving small pockets for individual meaning. And so the week moved forward, in its steady, muted way, carrying people through the soft repetitions of work and modest leisure, through public rituals and private reflections, through the quietly woven fabric of a life lived inside a system both restrictive and enduring, familiar and unchanging, predictable as the slow drift of history itself. One quiet evening drifts into another, each carrying its own small rituals and gentle moments, and on one such evening, Natasha finds herself wandering through the quiet halls of the Tretyakov Gallery. The museum feels almost hushed, as though the centuries of Russian and Soviet art displayed there have settled into a permanent twilight, inviting viewers to move slowly and breathe deeply. The paintings seem less like exhibits and more like fragments of a long, unbroken cultural memory. Icons, landscapes, portraits, and heroic scenes, arranged in a way that suggests continuity, as if history itself had chosen to speak in a calm, steady voice, rather than a triumphant one. Natasha lingers before canvases whose colors have softened with time, letting the muted tones and familiar themes wash over her like a kind of gentle lullaby, soothing in their predictability and reverence. Another evening is spent at home, curled comfortably in the warm pocket of her small living room. She reads a book borrowed from a friend, a translation of a foreign novel, not banned, yet not abundantly available either. The cover is worn, the pages slightly yellowed, the binding softened by many hands. This too is part of the Soviet experience, stories circulating quietly between friends, passed along like treasured whispers, expanding private worlds even when official channels remain narrow. She reads slowly, the rhythm of the translated prose blending with the faint hum of the radiator and the occasional distant sound from the courtyard below. These peaceful, solitary evenings offer a different kind of leisure, one woven from imagination and the soft comfort of borrowed words. Weekend plans develop in their usual, unhurried way. If the weather holds, perhaps there will be a trip to the countryside. A simple excursion that provides a sense of open space and fresh air, so different from the close buildings of Moscow. Or perhaps there will be a gathering at a friend's apartment, where people will talk, listen to music and share stories in a way that feels both intimate and quietly celebratory. These are small pleasures, but within the broader structure of Soviet life, they carry unexpected warmth. Such moments, unofficial, unplanned, and unembellished, form the threads of enjoyment and meaning that individuals continue to weave for themselves despite material limits and ideological boundaries. The system establishes the framework, but it cannot fully contain the ways people find comfort, creativity, and connection. As Natasha prepares for sleep that night, her thoughts drift softly through the responsibilities awaiting her in the coming days. There will be tasks at work, the arrival of an old university friend she hasn't seen in years, and a rumored delivery of winter boots at a particular shop, a small lead in a world where even ordinary purchases require planning, patience, and a touch of luck. Such is the texture of Soviet daily life, a steady blend of familiar routines and unpredictable shortages, of decisions shaped as much by rumor as by need. The lamp's light dims as she turns it off, and the room settles into a gentle darkness. Outside, Moscow continues its nocturnal breathing, quieter but never entirely still, a vast urban organism whose pulse can always be felt, even when unseen. Surrounding her, unseen but ever present, lies the immense machinery of the Soviet state, the system that allocates resources, defines acceptable speech, and shapes life's trajectories with deliberate slowness. Yet within that structure, ordinary people continue to craft their own meanings. They form friendships, cultivate small joys, and build inner worlds that no official narrative can fully capture. Sleep approaches gradually, like a soft tide rising. For a moment, Natasha lets go of the quiet negotiations that daily life requires. The balance between public conformity and private sincerity, between collective demands and personal aspirations. For now, there is only the darkness, the faint sounds of the city, and the slow drift into dreams that lie beyond the reach of any state. Time passes quietly, almost imperceptibly, and evening shadows lengthen once again across Moscow. It is 1983 now, and subtle shifts ripple beneath the surface of Soviet society. The long era of Leonid Brezhnev has ended, and after the brief, almost transitional leadership of Yuri Andropov, the system seems to float in a kind of uncertainty, as though unsure where history expects it to turn next. In her modest Moscow apartment, Natasha, now 33, prepares dinner in her small kitchen. The space feels more lived in than before. Years of accumulated belongings give it the soft comfort of an inhabited nest. Photographs on the walls trace the gentle arc of her life. Family gatherings, seaside vacations, celebrations with friends. Books fill the shelves, some found in official stores, others discovered in second-hand shops, and many shared hand-to-hand. The kitchen, though cramped by Western standards, remains the heart of the home, as it does in so many Soviet apartments. It is here that countless conversations have taken place, thoughtful, whispered, heartfelt discussions that would never unfold in public. The kitchen table has become a witness to private reflections, quiet political musings, shared frustrations, and the small triumphs that define ordinary life. Tonight, Natasha expects guests, a familiar circle of friends who gather regularly in each other's homes. These gatherings are among the most cherished forms of leisure in a society that has drifted from initial energy into what many call stagnation, a period of visible stability but fading dynamism, where official pronouncements inspire more quiet skepticism than confidence. As she surveys her refrigerator, a standard Soviet model humming dutifully in the corner, she considers the food she has prepared. It is simple fare, yet it represents real effort in a system where shopping takes patience, strategy, and often improvisation. There is a salad of carrots and cabbage, boiled potatoes, pickles her mother preserved during the summer months, and black bread purchased early that morning before the bakery queue grew long. A small amount of sausage, obtained through workplace distribution, lies ready on a plate. For dessert, she has made a cake, adapting a colleague's recipe to account for ingredients that never seem to be available when one needs them. The doorbell rings gently, and soon Olga and her husband Mikhail step inside, carrying a bottle of sweet Soviet champagne, the sparkling wine that marks nearly every kind of celebration. They are followed by Victor, a colleague from the Research Institute, and Irina, a university friend who now teaches literature. The ritual unfolds with comforting familiarity. Coats are hung in the narrow entryway, slippers are offered, and everyone gathers in the kitchen despite the presence of a proper living room. In Soviet homes, the kitchen is where life truly happens. Conversation begins with small updates, children's school achievements, workplace developments, news of rare items appearing in certain shops. Gradually it drifts toward books, films, music, and the cultural works that manage to convey human truth within ideological limits. Irina mentions the latest novel by Trifonov, whose quiet, nuanced depictions of city life resonate deeply with many. She offers to lend her copy once she finishes it. Such exchanges. Books passed from friend to friend, ideas carried in whispers, form the unofficial circulation of culture that supplements the limited official system. As hours slip by, the conversation grows deeper, touching on topics people approach far more cautiously outside private circles. Not open dissent, the vast majority have no desire for direct confrontation, but honest reflections on daily frustrations. Victor mentions that his department has been waiting 3 years for new equipment, expected to produce cutting-edge technology with aging machinery. Heads nod. Everyone is familiar with the polite fiction of official media proclaiming achievements that feel increasingly detached from lived experience. The gap between rhetoric and reality has become one of the defining features of late Soviet life. The old television, playing softly in the background, shows the evening news with its predictable sequence of leadership visits, industrial successes, and critiques of Western society. Nobody pays much attention. Most Soviet families treat the television as background noise unless a particularly beloved program is on. After dinner, they migrate to the living room, where Natasha proudly sets up her cassette player, a prized possession obtained through persistence and luck. They listen to a mixture of Soviet recordings and unofficially duplicated Western albums, the sound quality imperfect, but the music offering a glimpse into broader worlds. Time passes gently, unhurried. Public transport runs late into the night, and these gatherings, so vital for genuine conversation, are not rushed. They speak of children, of how to raise them within the system's expectations while also teaching them to think with compassion and nuance. Olga tells of her 8-year-old son repeating slogans from school, declaring that America wants war and the Soviet Union wants peace. She tries gently to explain that ordinary people everywhere desire the same things. This balancing act, helping children navigate a system without being wholly shaped by it. is a common concern among parents of their generation. As the evening moves toward its close, discussions turn practical: where to find certain goods, which stores might receive shipments, how best to tackle bureaucratic processes. In the Soviet world, this kind of shared knowledge is essential. Personal networks, far more than official channels, provide guidance and emotional support. Around 11, the gathering dissolves into warm farewells, embraces, and promises of future meetings. These evenings, filled with slow conversation and genuine connection, remain precious in a society where public and private lives rarely align, and where authentic expression often finds its home only in the quiet, trusted spaces among friends. After her guests finally drift out into the cool Moscow night and the apartment door settles shut again, Natasha begins the small, unhurried rituals that always close her evenings. The kitchen, still warm with the memory of conversation and shared food, waits for her quiet hands. She washes each dish slowly, without resentment or hurry. No dishwashers exist in these apartments, but the familiar clink of plates and the soft swish of water form a domestic rhythm she has known all her life. On the radio, the single late-night classical program continues its gentle broadcast, the strings and piano weaving their way through the stillness of her home like calm, measured breaths. She waters the plants on the windowsill, small green companions whose existence depends on modest daily gestures. In their silent resilience, they bring a thread of living softness into the grey solidity of the city. Her bathroom routine is simple, almost austere by Western standards of the early 1980s. A bar of standard soap, a tube of basic toothpaste, a bottle of uncomplicated shampoo, each item functional rather than luxurious, familiar in its plainness. Soviet consumer goods are rarely about choice or indulgence. They are meant to endure, not to delight. Yet in the simplicity there is a kind of clarity, a sense of knowing exactly what to expect year after year. In the bedroom, she winds the small alarm clock, the ticking a steady heartbeat in the growing quiet. She pulls back the sturdy covers, the bedding firm and long-lasting, made not for fashion but for reliability. Before surrendering to sleep, she reads for a few minutes from a cherished volume, a collection of Anna Akhmatova's poems. Once restricted, now cautiously permitted, these verses carry delicate weight, sorrow, endurance, the fragile dignity found in difficult times. As she reads, the room feels softer, as though the very walls lean in to listen. Outside the window, Moscow settles into its nighttime posture. The city does not truly sleep, but it relaxes. The great loops of traffic thin, the factories continue their endless shifts, but the streets grow quieter, the offices darken, the shop doors remain locked until morning light returns. The metro trains rumble less frequently now, passing like distant memories under the earth. All around her, the enormous machinery of the state continues its constant operations, power supply, surveillance, infrastructure, maintaining the immense urban organism in its nocturnal rhythm. Natasha's thoughts drift gently as sleep begins to near, moving through the soft maze of recollections, responsibilities, and half-formed intentions. Her life has unfolded entirely within the framework of the Soviet system. Education shaped by planned priorities, work assigned according to institutional needs, housing allocated by state mechanisms, leisure permitted within ideological boundaries. And yet, within these structural borders, she has built something deeply personal, meaningful work, lasting friendships, evenings of conversation, quiet pleasures, and a sense of inner life that belongs wholly to her. Like so many of her contemporaries, she lives with a dual awareness, the official narratives repeated in public and the private truths that reside quietly beneath them. This duality is not a torment, but a practical adaptation, a way of keeping one's authentic self intact within a system that both supports and constrains. As sleep draws closer, her thoughts scatter, becoming lighter, less anchored. The patterns of daily Soviet life lie ahead in their predictable order. Work tasks, errands, cues, brief moments of joy, the slow movement of seasons through the city. Within that predictability, small variations offer texture, and each personal gesture, brings meaning that official structures cannot fully map or define. What she cannot know, as she slips gradually towards sleep in the year 1983, is how little time remains for the system that has shaped her entire existence. The Soviet Union, heavy and seemingly immutable, has less than a decade left before its dissolution. The signs of strain are present. Economic stagnation, technological lag, the widening gap between rhetoric and reality. But almost no one imagines the sweeping transformation that lies ahead. The vocabulary for the future has not yet taken shape in ordinary conversation. Outside dissident circles, there is no clear vision of what might come after this vast familiar order. For now, there is only this evening, this apartment, this quiet descent toward rest. Outside, the immense country stretches across 11 time zones, home to countless peoples, traditions, and landscapes, all woven into the fabric of a political structure that has endured for nearly 70 years. Inside, a single woman closes her day. Just one life among millions, marked by the ambitions and contradictions of an immense historical experiment. Only a few years from now, in 1985, a new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, will rise to power, bringing with him ideas of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. These reforms will loosen the rigid framework of Soviet life, releasing long-suppressed energies and uncertainties. Ordinary citizens like Natasha will find themselves navigating a mixture of expanded freedoms and unsettling instability. Prices will shift, opportunities will appear, structures will dissolve, and a new world will begin to take shape, complicated and unsteady. But that belongs to a future still invisible, unreachable from this quiet night. As Natasha drifts closer to sleep, the small sounds of her apartment become part of the lullaby of the night, the hum of the refrigerator, the subtle creak of the building, the distant murmur of another family's radio. These modest noises feel like anchors, ordinary companions that have followed her through many evenings. They surround her with a sense of continuity, even as the larger world rests on the edge of change. Stars, faint behind the thin cover of Moscow clouds, shine above her window. The same stars seen from New York or Paris or Tokyo, utterly indifferent to the ideologies and boundaries that divide human societies. Inside, a citizen of the Soviet Union closes her eyes, her individual dreams preparing to unfold, shaped partly by her world and partly by the private territories of the mind that no system can completely reach. And as her thoughts loosen and dissolve, as her breathing deepens and the boundaries of consciousness fade, she crosses gently into that universal human landscape of sleep. In this moment, distinctions blur between Soviet and non-Soviet, between ideology and personal truth, between historical circumstance and the simple need for rest. What remains is only the quiet, the darkness, the soft drift downward into dreams. Moscow deepens into night. Millions of lives shift from wakefulness to rest in overlapping waves, sustaining the city's rhythm while allowing its people to renew themselves. Tomorrow will come with its mixture of burdens and small joys, its negotiations between public role and private meaning. But for now, all settles into stillness. Close your eyes and let the quiet carry you.